From the Sean Newman podcast today, I'm joined by Marty up north, or Martin Belanger. So first off, sir, thanks for hopping in.
Yeah, great to be here. It was a long drive. Took me 5 hours to get here, but I wanted to do this in person. I did not want to do a Zoom call. I'm tired of Zoom calls.
Yeah, I think that's becoming, everyone's tired of everything COVID's brought. You know, in the beginning, it's kind of like, oh, I can work from home. Well, that ain't so bad.
Sure.
Oh, I don't got to make the 5-hour drive. Oh, I don't mind that. Now you're like, I just want to get in the car. I want to go somewhere.
Well, I mean, speaking of cars, I do my taxes. I'm already getting ready to do my taxes. I fueled my car 8 times last year. 8 times. I drove 6,000 kilometers. I used to drive 30 or 40,000 a year. So COVID has had all sorts of weird impacts. And yeah, I want to get in my car and drive. I want to go to a restaurant, sit down with somebody and have a beer I don't even want to walk in with a mask. And I seldom do nowadays. But I mean, I want this to end.
You get, I assume you get harassed a bit with no mask going in a restaurant, and is it starting to ease up?
It's, I approach it in a sort of a very smart way. I generally walk in with the mask in my hands or hanging on an ear kind of thing. And then you walk in and if it's good, you continue that way. And then, an example is Walmart. I'll walk without a mask there. But if there's, forgive my French, a little old lady down the aisle, I don't want to, I still respect my seniors. So I'm going to walk around her or put on the mask when I go by her. But if you're a 24-year-old university student, get out of my way. Like I'm done with this. So I approach it that way. And it is changing. I mean, it depends on where you go. I mean, I still live, rural Alberta, so it's a little better than, say, downtown Calgary.
Yeah, we both can agree to that.
Now, I'd like to walk around here. What's it like around here in Lloyd?
It depends where you go, right? Different, probably just like any city or town. I'm told if you come from the cities, so the big ones, Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina, probably the 4 biggest in the area, coming here is like a breath of fresh air. But then there's all of us sitting here going, well, the fresh air is still being muzzled.
You're not seeing it. Yeah. It's all perspective.
100%. It's all perspective. Now, I should preface, there's going to be a chunk of the audience probably never heard of you. And I was saying to you before we got going.
Shame on them.
You're about the 6th personality I think I've pulled off of Twitter. Just find your thoughts fascinating and how you conduct yourself and everything else. And so you go by the handle Marty up north. But maybe you could start with who you are, Marty. Maybe a bit of your background. You were telling me before we even got going that you got quite a YouTube following. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me, but I had no idea. So maybe let's start there. And that's one of the cool things about sitting down with different people you stumble across on Twitter. You start to like, oh, this is who this person is. Because obviously there's no face to a lot of us.
No, and people on Twitter do become sort of an online friend, which is a new concept, right? Relatively new. We have in-person friends and we have online friends. But who am I? So, I graduated engineering 30 years ago in the 1990s. I'm from out east, so I'm a Franco-Ontarian is what I am. Going through school, I had the opportunity to do some work terms here in Alberta. So I came to Alberta as a student, and then when I graduated, I came here permanently. I remember my father had been a salesman, and he had traveled quite a bit of the country. And when I came here the first time, Dad said, when you go to Alberta, we'll never see you again, because he understood my personality, and I didn't quite know what that meant until I got here. So I'm an engineer, and I graduated at sort of a tough time. So I took a job. I basically begged for a job, and I got a job in Fox Creek, Alberta. So I come from the big city of studies in Ottawa, and I end up in Fox Creek. And in Fox Creek, like I said, that's where you have these values that you have as a youth, but then they came out when I got here. I realized, I'm home. I didn't come here at first thinking this is where I'm going to find the people I get along with, but it happened. I land in Fox Creek. Everybody's there for work. We have the same common work ethic. At the end of the day, we go out and we do outdoorsy things, golf, canoe, fish, hunt, things like that. And so Marty is just the guy who worked in the oil patch as an engineer for 20 years up north. in towns like Fox Creek, Edson, Grand Prairie, and did some, love the oil patch, love solving problems in the oil patch. And then living in smaller towns gives you that nice work-life balance of doing things after hours. And then somehow or other I got into producing videos and putting them on YouTube, and I had to pick a name, and people had already called me Marty from the North. I'd come visit family and they'd say Marty from the North, or somehow or other it stuck, and it was Marty up north. So on my channel, it's focused on outdoor pursuits like hiking and canoeing, hunting. But I'm an engineer at heart, so even when I'm doing a video and I'm talking about something, I always bring in a little bit of engineering. Talk about the geology or why liquid fuel is better than a solid fuel, things like that. And so I just like explaining things, coaching, and that was my life. It wasn't political, as a.
Here's the thing. I think if you rewind the clock 2 years ago, and I mean for everybody, it takes on different times when it happened. For a lot of people, they weren't political like 2 years ago. These past 2 years we've lived through have been something straight out of a book.
Something bizarre, and yeah, for some people it's 2 years. Me, I'd say I was non-political until about 2012 or 13.
Okay.
I just wanted people.
What dragged you into politics?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Well, I mean, basically, I wanted people leave me alone. Okay, leave me alone is what I wanted in life. And then as a young, family man, I got my family going, and business life is good for me. I'm an engineer. I'm not going to lie, right? I mean, we're doing oil and gas, and it's paying the bills, and I got a nice house, and I can buy a snowmobile at the end of the day. And, who was our premier at the time is Ralph Klein. We knew of Ralph from his antics on the. But if you ask me, Marty, of a 40-year-old Marty, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, I pay taxes. My taxes go to Ottawa. It helps people. And I'm not too worried about it. I make enough money and so forth. When did it become political? Well, it becomes political when you start realizing that your taxes are being wasted. And that became really, really evident. It became political for me when you start seeing that your government is actually helping others but not helping you, and it's beyond not helping you. It's now trying to hurt you. So the first evidence of a government trying to hurt me, it's a bit of a it's a stretch, but I'm an engineer, and they're making the regulations and the rules tougher and tougher and tougher without reason. Me as an engineer, I want to understand the problem. I'd like the government to say, what's the problem? And then engage us, and maybe we'll come up with a solution. But when they systematically say something like, we're getting rid of oil and gas, it's like, wow, you're attacking me. It's my livelihood. So I got to get a little bit political, And then in 2015 or 14, we elect Notley here, and we elect Trudeau out east, and we got the double whammy. And now I'm being attacked on regulations, and I'm being attacked on my lifestyle because I'm conservative and because I'm old stock. And so it's starting to feel like the government's not even working for me. And then you get into today where you got Trudeau literally talking about being quoted, not just Trudeau but others, saying we're going to make life for the unvaccinated, which I happen to be, unbearable. I'm like, wow, I have a leader of a country saying that he's going to make life unbearable for a segment of society. Can you imagine if he said those words and substituted unvaccinated with something else? I'm going to make life unbearable for new immigrants, or life unbearable for young adults without children, who choose to make decisions. And so I got political. And in my role in politics, well, maybe I want to pause. Am I going too far, too fast?
No. I'm trying. I think you're doing a great job.
Okay.
I can hop in here and just say, I think as soon as, I'm a hockey guy. You get the room, right?
Yeah.
I look at Trudeau as he's our captain. And I go, you're not going to love everything that comes out of his mouth. And I'm like you.
I coach hockey as well. So
I want to be left alone. I'm going to work my job. I'm going to pay my taxes. I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen. And after that, and I go 2 years into this. Yeah, I didn't make the choice that so many are making. Okay. Yeah. But now it's like, but you're the devil of society. And we just keep going on and on. I to quote the French president Macron, he
Macron.
said, "I'm not about pissing off the French people, but as far as the non-vaccinated, I really want to piss them off, and we will continue to do this till the end. This is the strategy."
And
he's quoted as saying that, and you go, well, then it's not that far out of the playbook for other world leaders to be doing what they're doing.
They're all playing from the same playbook.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even coincidence. You can find almost word for word some of the quotes they use. So let's get right to where I got to Twitter. So I got to Twitter, and that first Twitter was just a discovery thing, an opportunity to chat. But then Twitter is my political platform. I mean, YouTube is sports, Facebook is, pictures so that mom and dad, they're passed away now, but so people can see. LinkedIn is professional, and Twitter is like full contact politics. But my approach to Twitter though is tempered by the fact that I'm an engineer. So, I look at well, let me step back. So I look at our government as having a responsibility of ruling for the good of the people, which I'm in the process of, I don't think they do that very often anymore. I look at the opposition as being there to keep the government in check. And I look at people like myself as scientists and doctors and engineers and lawyers and accountants to help provide some guidance to the government and check that the policies are fact-based. Generally, I mean, some policies can be purely on opinion. Should we allow men to marry men, women to marry women? Sure, that's the government's allowed to pass things based on opinion. But in the case of something like, should we phase out coal? Should we mandate masks? Should we ban air travel in this region? I mean, those are things that should be based on evidence, and so that's the role of people like me. And then you're supposed to have a media that reports on all of this in an objective, non-biased way. So now I'm on Twitter, and it's like, which role am I? I'm definitely not government, and I'm not opposition. But I play an opposition role. So when I see some tweets by the premier or the prime minister that the opposition isn't going after, I'll highlight that. I'll act as a sounding board for policies. When I see policies, I'll challenge policies. And then I'll act as a media, of course, because we're on Twitter, which is social media. So I play some of those roles, and I try to do it mostly with a bit of humor, but mostly fact based. And that's been my approach. Is if you come to me too much with anecdotes and stuff like that, we're not going to engage. I want to engage on facts. And then this pandemic, well, man, this is just a goldmine for facts and for information, and I'm kind of having fun with it, And there's one last role I guess I should play, and it does play a role. Like I said, when I do with YouTube videos, I like to educate and coach, and Twitter for me is definitely that opportunity. It allows me to coach some people and share information, but it's two ways. I mean, I'll put out something there and somebody will challenge me and go, oh yeah, you're right. It should be, so I've had a lot of, it's a rapid, quick back and forth with a ton of intelligent people.
Yeah. Well, and it really, I don't know if, gladiators or not gladiators, Roman soldiers used to practice, right? They used to practice on each other. I find Twitter, you can expose your ideas, get absolutely viciously attacked, and be like, I hadn't thought about it that way, or, that's an interesting thought, or, no, I can actually push back on that, and you get to play this back and forth.
Oh, absolutely, you get to practice. I mean, my wife will say, "You'd love to argue for the fact of arguing." I'm like, yeah, sometimes it's arguing to play so that you can have it in your back pocket when it's critical to be able to argue. One thing I wish we could do on Twitter, which we can't do very often, in real life, it was easy sometimes to really disguise yourself and play the devil's advocate and take somebody else's position to see how to counter me. So to pretend I'm not Marty and attack and debate Marty. But on Twitter, if you try to get into that mindset, boy, the dialogue between the clans is getting pretty vicious right now. So the ability to learn from each other, truly.
Okay, well, let's
challenges.
I want to put your engineering brain on for a second then, because I've sat with Mike Kuzmiskis, who and my brother's an engineer, and engineering brains are fun to play with and watch, right? And Mike Kuzmiskas was ICOR Blood Services. So they're coming. Shout out. They're coming to Lloyd here. So if you haven't signed up for the February 14th to 17th clinic, please do, because I think it's the government should be doing this. They should be finding a way out of the pandemic, which is if people don't want to get vaccinated, let's get them a service that allows to see if they got the antibodies.
So you're talking specifically checking for immunity.
Antibodies, natural immunity. Yeah, absolutely. To me, what they did in Lacrete was brilliant.
It totally was. And in fact, I've tweeted on that subject. I mean, if, remember back in the early days of the pandemic when we said that the herd immunity is the way out, well, then as an engineer, I'd say if you've already established one of the guidelines that herd immunity is the way out, then you should measure immunity.
100%.
Right? I mean, hockey's the same way. If our goal is to win games, we better count the goals and figure out our plus minus percentage, right? So it'd be silly to play a hockey game and then just manage how many push-ups a kid can do. So, and so the government failed miserably, I think, on the whole concept of immunity.
And so does the media. The media literally...
I've given up on mainstream media. I mean, they're selling. You see them eventually. A story becomes almost impossible to ignore, and even then, they still ignore it. Right? That story should be picked up by mainstream media, I think.
Well, I talk with Mike quite a bit, and so they did the piece on him in CBC, right?
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know what I don't want to quote Mike. I'll give my thoughts. I thought it looked a bit like a smear piece, right? Like it didn't really. It kind of took a couple of his quotes, put it in there, said you got to be still cautious. Booster is still better than natural immunity. Like it just twisting things.
Actually, I can see that perception that it looked a bit like a smear. My other take on it is that I remember commenting on it saying. The reporter, whoever wrote the piece, had all the right information but drew the wrong conclusions. And sometimes you wonder, are they drawing the wrong conclusions on purpose as part of a smear, or are they just incapable of interpreting the data?
Well, regardless, it worked. It just in the wrong way for him because now he's going to Grand Prairie and Bonnyville, Lloyd.
When you say going there, like he's doing clinics and
pop-up clinics, just like Lacrete did. Going in for several days and
get thousands of samples from people.
And then an engineer, what do you want? You want data. Give me the data points.
Totally.
And to me, I look at it and I go, when I first had Mike on, what it was before Christmas for sure, probably two months ago at least. I have here marked, engineers love to solve a problem. Give us a problem, we'll solve it. And me and Mike had talked about it, and I'm going to bring it up with you, right? Stick a bunch of disciplines in a room, whiteboard. This is the problem. How do we solve it, right?
Right.
I'm not saying ICOR is the way out of this, but it should be a good data point to be like, hey, we got lots of people with natural immunity. Let's start recognizing it. Let's start moving on from this and get out.
There's so much good data like that. I mean, and you listen to some of the real doctors, like you had who did you have a podcast with recently?
Dr. Alexander or McCullough,
and they quote studies, and then you curiously go and look at those things. I mean, there was a study that I saw, and I read part of it. They took, and I'm familiar with studies because I belong to a study, right? I'm part of the Tomorrow Project, so I get poked and prodded every year for samples, and I was part of a sub-study on antibodies during this epidemic, and then they took some of my blood samples and they're going to freeze them and test them in future years for whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then another study, they did that. They had samples that were 10 years old. 10-year-old samples, and they just take 1,000 of them out of the box, and then they test them, and then I can't remember exactly, but like in 6% of them there was already antibodies to COVID. So it's like, where'd they come from? They're 10-year-old samples. Well, they're predecessor antibodies to predecessors of COVID, to SARS and to other things, And then that data is completely ignored. I mean, speaking of data, like, when Kenny and Hinshaw are giving a press conference, God, I'd love them to actually do a Steve Jobs type presentation. Put that graph up there and tell us why you just said what you said. Show us your evidence and how you interpret the evidence. They never do that. They never even show their evidence. They talk about their evidence, but they never show it. And that's where DeSantis and some of the guys from Florida, he shows the evidence. He's telling people this is why it doesn't work, or this is why it works. This is what we've learned. I mean, we're 2 years into this thing, and I argue that we're almost at the starting point. So how many times did we adjust and pivot in the last 2 years? And when I say we, I mean Hinshaw and Kenny Hinshaw.
Yeah, we're speaking Alberta specifically here.
Yeah, the big we.
Well, what was I'm going to put a pin in the data for a second. I want to get to that for sure. I have written down here, and so I don't forget it. Engineers love to solve problems.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest problems we got, and you mentioned the two tribes, is as long as they put the divide. I had Jamie Sinclair came in. He worked. He was a military guy for 33 years, and he worked in Bosnia and Croatia, and he saw some things. And one of the things he said on here was, it always starts with a divide. Doesn't matter how small the divide is. It can seem inconsequential. But if it always starts with a divide, and then you'll see what true, like the worst of humanity can be.
If he was a peacekeeper or somebody else,
yes,
he's witnessed it. Absolutely.
He's witnessed it. And so I go, okay, so if we know that, our own military is telling us that. It's like, okay, the big problem we got to solve here is, I-Corps, in my mind, is pushing a way to give the government reasonable data or credibility. All the public people are paying for it. We're paying for our way out of this. Like, just here, this is the data. That's one way to push on the government so they can tell the people, listen, we got all these great tests coming in, and I-Corps, at some point, they have to, if all these communities, but maybe not. How do we stitch back together the two fragments of society? And the two fragments, honestly, are... I think, we're 80-some% vaccinated in Alberta, right? And the story they sow is that the 10% are killing grandma and everything else. How do you pull these two segments back together?
Okay, well, it's a common problem we face in industry. So, the answer is, for me, twofold. Leadership. So a leader that is non-divisive. So, Kenny's good that way. But he's a little bit overwhelmed. But if I'm talking about Trudeau is a divider extraordinaire. But let's say you get a strong leader and you're faced with a problem. I'm a strong leader. I work in industry, and I got an office in Halifax and an office in Alberta, and they bitch about each other. Well, I'm not going to go. So when the people in Halifax are bitching about the fact that the guys in Alberta make more money, I don't just say, yeah, that's right, or, oh, you're right, you should be complaining. And then when I go to Alberta and they complain that the guys in Halifax have a lower standard of living, I don't immediately sympathize with them and say, you're right. I find the common ground. And the way I find the common ground, usually me personally, is by sharing information. That's the engineer in me. So then I say, listen, I'll show you I'll be transparent. I'll show you the wages of the project manager in Alberta and the project manager in Halifax. You're making less money. But he's got less holidays, you got more. His cost of living is this, yours is that, the taxes are this, and then I use data as a way to find the common ground. You don't have to always, but finding the common ground is the way to, using information is a way to find the common ground. There's other tricks for good leaders to thinking win-win, good negotiation skills, a very solid objective. Nothing beats an objective. If a hockey team's objective is to win the Stanley Cup and I'm a good leader, I can literally walk through the whole organization down to the guy who's picking up the garbage after the game. And if he asks me, what's my role in this organization? I'm like, your role is to pick up the garbage so that the customer has a good experience, so that the customer wants to come back, and so that the customer will cheer loudly, which will encourage our players, which will, so a leader who understands who really knows the problem trying to be solved or the objectives and has good skills will do that. Look at some of the guys, look at political leaders that we have. Who becomes a political leader nowadays? It's a popularity contest. You're winning a popularity contest. Some of these guys don't even have skills, and they won't even acknowledge that they don't have skills. I'm going to pick on Trudeau. Trudeau is Peter Pan. He's the most brutal person for acknowledging. Somebody asked Jordan Peterson, "What would you tell Trudeau?" And I was fascinated by his answer because I thought, "Ooh." But then he paused. He's like, I would ask Trudeau, have you ever thought that what you're doing could have negative consequences? And then you realize that leader never thinks like that. So, where are we going with that?
Well, no, I'm letting you finish your thoughts. So
Yeah.
here's what I heard, and I'll throw it back at you then. Your solution is a really good one. It's one we've all thought of. We need different leaders. Or that's how you can fix this. Be non-divisive, which maybe Mo and Kenny, we sit right on the border, can pull off. Scott Mo's come out here in the last little bit talking about lockdowns and how lockdowns honestly don't work, and how he talk about the impacts of locking down businesses, let alone kids and everything else. So maybe there's a way they can pull that back together on a provincial level.
Well,
on the grand scheme of things, though, we're going to have Trudeau for another
2 years at least.
2 years at least, which means this is the long game. Like, it feels like I'm sitting. I didn't realize how much I reference movies, but I feel like Stephen Strange. Like we're into the end game now, right? Like it's not that. Well, actually, lots of people think it's that dire, but with Trudeau. He ain't going anywhere.
No. Well, you never know. I mean, I'm honestly surprised there hasn't been a rebellion in his party. I mean, there are some smart people. Let's get back to a couple of. So Kenny is a strong leader. Actually, I'm not a fan of Kenny right now. I'm not a fan of Kenny.
Are we a fan of any politics?
No,
in Canada?
No. So I have a whole thought on that, which is, again, it's back to my days in business. People who get you in trouble don't get you out. And so for me, that used to manifest itself by the fact that I worked for a lot of predator companies that bought companies that had made bad decisions and were going out of business, and we buy them, right? We buy them at a depressed price. Well, if the management of a team made bad decisions to the point where they got sold and I bought you, it's pretty unlikely that I'm going to keep anybody on that team on board, because for lack of better words, you guys failed. And we succeeded, and so so you failed. You don't get the guy who gets us in trouble doesn't get us out. The guy who set the house on fire is not the guy I'm going to call to put out the fire. You failed. And I'm being harsh, but I think that a lot of politicians during this pandemic failed. Kenny in particular. I mean, he had a very good. I think you talked about military people. You should get Dave Redmond on here, or I don't know if you had him, but. We had a plan, and his plan was sound. It wasn't his plan. He helped the government put it together, and then Kenny somehow or other threw it out. And then I remember,
Why would you do that?
I have no idea.
You said right at the start you don't like conspiracy theories because blah blah blah. Yeah. And I'm right with you. I'm like, some of that just seems, but that one makes zero sense. Like 0 cents.
It's politics. We know that Kenny, again, because Kenny, so one of his advantages is also his blind side, is he does try to unite, and he does play the uniting goal. And I can do the same thing. I can go to Halifax and Calgary and meet the teams and try and find a common ground. But at some point, I'm the leader, and I'm going to say, okay, we're done debating this. The proper answer is you're getting this and you're getting that. So Kenny maybe plays too much politics once in a while. And even though, so another example, throwing aside the pandemic plan, I'm not exactly sure why. But, I look at what he did in July. I honestly thought in July when we were open for business, and again, language is important because I'm like, why don't you just say open for good? But he knew.
Because he knew.
He knew in the back of his mind that, it was kind of like saying 100%. You never say 100% in politics. But I truly think he tried to help people out of this pandemic. And I think if he had done more with more information, more data, and cooperated with Rachel Notley and others, because at the end of the day, I tweeted lately, I think they both failed because they're not working together. If we were truly in a pandemic, both leaders should be working together. If we were in a war against, whatever, Japan, and we had somebody in the background constantly bitching, that wouldn't help. So is it a war? Is it the biggest crisis of the century? Because they said that at the beginning, but Notley's certainly not acting like it is. So
the answer to that question is, my thought on it, I shouldn't say the answer, but my thought on it is it isn't, and it is. Like it's twofold. It's like what it was billed to be isn't what it became, right? It was billed to be like it was going to kill hundreds of thousands of people in Canada alone. That has not happened. It hasn't even come remotely close to that. Yeah. Like the average age of death, and I'm not making light of this, but is 78 in Alberta alone. And I mean, across Canada, it's closer to 80. Like, it's just like, when you hear that, it's like, oh, well,
Yeah,
and then you start digging into the data and everything else. But one of the things that is, for right now is the biggest challenge we've faced in my lifetime is this stuck in purgatory where we can't get out of it. And now it's pushed down on kids, and you see the excess death stats, and you see
the overdoses, and we have a generation of I posted that the other day. I mean, if you're in grade 2 right now, grade 2, grade 1, or kindergarten, you've never known normal school. And in those formative years, it's problematic. And I want to bring back that to what you just said. It might not have been even if it was not the biggest crisis in the last 100 years, somehow or other, I think we might have turned it into it. I mean, in trying to solve a problem, and I get criticized for saying that. I'll say, we flipped the economy upside down and destroyed livelihoods to save 3,000 people that would have died anyways. And then you get immediately accused of being insensitive. What if it's your father's like, my father died in similar circumstances? So it's
but this is where society's at. I bring Skip up an awful lot. Skip Craig, who used to play for the Buffalo Sabres and Boston Bruins back in the day, Bobby Orr days, the first year of the Buffalo Sabres, he once told me hockey mirrors society.
Totally.
So everybody's bitching, complaining about how the game's played. It's like, well, look at society. We want to wrap everybody in a bubble suit. We want to mask them 7 times over. We want to put plexiglass in front of anyone. We don't want anyone to touch, because heaven forbid somebody gets a sniffle or a cough. And I'm not like, did people die from COVID? Yes.
Well, and people over exaggerate the risk of COVID, and that's one of the things I tried all along, right? Is to bring in this. You got people say, well, what if it was your child? I'm like, okay, hang on one second. So you just told me that you did a risk evaluation and you came up with a conclusion that you needed to double vaccinate yourself in order to protect your child. Fine. Using the same theory that you just gave me, you shouldn't even put your kid in a car, because the car is way more dangerous. So you're playing the game, but that's a topic in all of itself, right? Human bias towards disease is a bizarre one. It's it's an interesting problem, because humans have been on the planet for about. So I'm going to wrap this around, but humans have been on the planet for, let's say, 10, 14 million years, and we've evolved. And for the first 13.999 million years, the things that killed us were disease, animals, natural obstacles, drowning, falling, stuff like that. And so our brain is used to having a bias towards that and protecting ourselves from that. That's why some people still have the fear of snakes, even though we don't even live anywhere near snakes, right? That's just in your lizard brain. And then on the other hand, we have modern things like planes and Legos and whatnot. I mean, a kid, well, here's a joke. Not a joke. This is bad, but there was an incident in Australia a month ago. 5 kids died on a bouncy castle, right? So I tweeted about that. So as a year-end,
how did they die?
Year-end school celebration, the bouncy castle is installed. Kids are bouncing on the castle, and the wind picks it up, tosses this thing like 30 feet in the air. They all fall out, and 5 kids are dead. Now, this is cruel of me to say this, but statistically, the odds of dying from COVID are less than the odds of dying in a bouncy castle. So now, if you're a parent who is going to quote me on the odds and say my kid can't go back to school, I'm going to say, well, okay, fine. You've shown me where you draw your risk threshold. Now, and that because of that, your kid can't go on a bouncy castle, can't play with scissors, cannot play with Legos because he might choke from Legos. Don't even think about bringing him next to the pool. So the whole idea of bringing people to understand risks is complicated because we have these huge biases. And what I was going to finish with was, modern technology. So modern risks like skydiving and flights and things like that are way riskier than nuclear reactors. But we literally blow those off, and we blow them off because there are choices, and we're afraid that COVID is somebody else's choice. So somebody else's choice is going to hurt me. People say, yeah, I don't give a shit if skydiving is dangerous. I'm not doing it. So, yeah, we live in interesting times.
Well, I have a couple thoughts there because I go, I had Shane Getson on here. He was an MLA, or is an MLA,
yeah.
And he said he said something that's really stuck with me. He said, you want politicians and leaders to like do what we believe is the right thing. But public officials, politicians, are voted in. So they're
popularity contest.
Public opinion.
Yeah.
And he goes in, public opinion is formed by media. If media started talking about the dangers of driving over and over and over and over and over and over again, you might start to see less people. You might. I'm not saying you would. I'm just saying all of a sudden it'd be the forefront of people's brains. The amount of media push on COVID everything is like a bad disease in itself. It is wild to watch how people have reacted. And I would go one step further just to say, like, I read in the middle of this, I read The Moral Dilemma on Vaccination, right? Because they've been having this debate, similar to what we are, for 300 years. You know, you go back to the 1700s, they were having debates on whether you should vaccinate healthy people because they're healthy. Why would you do that?
Right.
Now, I'm sure, yes, over 300 years, we have improved vaccines. Obviously, we can all agree on that. But you have to remember, at one point in time, smallpox was killing 1 in 6 people. That's 15% of the population. And they still had the argument on whether they should give it to every healthy kid, blah, 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 blah. Because they knew if they vaccinated healthy people, there was a chance they were going to kill them. I mean,
yeah.
And so here we are, 300 years later, losing, let's go 1 in 100 people, and we'll strongly skew them, as we know, to the elderly and sick and everything else. And this is where society is at. We're trying to save every human life, which on the surface is like, yeah, no, that makes sense. But in practice, falls utterly, so what harm have we done in trying to save everyone?
A lot. I mean, yeah, oh God, there's so much to unravel there. Actually, that's where it's important to, again, that whole decision could be guided by the end game, by the objective. Is the objective? People say we're at war against COVID, similar to World War II. So if that's the objective, is to eradicate it, then that's a different strategy than if the objective was to live with it. And I'm not even sure we're agreed on the objective, right? Because some people said, we'll live with it. We just need to, but in order to live with it, we need to flatten the curve so we don't overwhelm the system. Other people, and then other people would say, no, I'm COVID zero. So as a society, we don't even agree on, do we live with it? Do we eradicate it? Do we adapt to it? What do we do? So it's challenging and it's misguided. So if we had that national debate at first. Not at first, but within a few months when we had a lot of evidence, we could have sat down and said, okay, what is the end game here? Are we trying to eradicate it, or are we just trying to live with it? I don't even know what we're trying to do at this point, because everything keeps changing. I mean, if I look back at the time, originally a lot of people said, politicians and people, it was like, we're going to live with it. We're going to achieve 80% herd immunity. And now you can have your original goal and then eventually pivot, either because your solution's not working or something changed, right? But I'm not even clear. And I am an educated engineer, Albertan, very well versed in matters, and I don't know the answer. So imagine poor Joe Schmuck. And Joe Schmuck's being told what to think by the media or whoever. Actually, it's a good point. I don't know what the end game is.
Well, and that's where, that's, I think that's what a lot of us get hung up on, is like, if the end game was to reduce the effect on hospitals, why not allow for early treatment? Why not take some of the solutions that these are the popular ones, India, Japan, Mexico. Those come to mind. I mean, you just got to look to the south and see what Mexico did.
Mexico just opened yesterday, I think.
Yeah. Done with COVID-19 protocols. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's Mexico.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking. I just mean, like, they have a bigger population. They have different problems. And I was fascinated early on, and by early on, I mean mid-2021, when I started reading that in December 2020, roughly, they started setting up kiosks where if you got sick with COVID, they gave you an at-home package, kit, to try and keep you out of the hospital because they have the same problems. They don't want to overflow the hospitals. And I go, like, literally, that's happening in our continent, and we can't take those ideas.
I should be taking notes because you just made me think of a bunch of things. But I'll let's get back to Mexico and other things.
Sure.
That's another failure of our system right now. Is, as an engineer, if I got a problem to solve, the first thing I do, I'm lazy, is I see if somebody else solved the same problem.
100%.
Right? Why would I reinvent the wheel? We never
cheat the curve.
Yeah, and we didn't do any of that. If we did, it's on the surface, it looks pretty iffy because we had all sorts of evidence early on from Italy and other places that said this is killing the 80-year-olds, so maybe the kids are okay. And so I don't think we explored. So that's one thing I want to talk about. I don't think the cooperation was there. But the other thing is, you bring up an excellent point, man. I mean, early treatments and things like that, we never hear about that. And other countries focused entirely. I mean, we live in a country, I think it's a sad reflection when we say something like, I think even Hinshaw said it, the ICUs are the cornerstone of our healthcare system. Like, are you kidding me? The ICU should be
the last resort.
It's the last resort.
It is.
But now you're changing the narrative, and you got everybody screaming about, ICUs. What would I do if I was a leader? I'd be like, whoa, where did this happen? And I don't go with it. I would say, sorry, bad wording, and this is the reality. Our strategy is this. And I don't even know what our strategy is, what the government strategy was.
Well,
it was all predicated on the vaccine. We're betting on the vaccine.
Yeah, well, and I would say we've taken our not our marching orders. Geez, that sounds terrible. It's
pretty close to real, I think.
I think we've looked around the world, right? And what we've looked at is things that Biden and the U.S. Democrats have done as the way we want to go. We're very aligned with that. I don't mean to say we're going to turn into Australia, but a lot of what Australia's messaging comes up in what Canadians message. And you just go, like, early on, I get it. Like, if you're in the ICU and you get some ivermectin or whatever, ivermectin was the taboo word, still is a taboo word, which is funny in itself. But it's like, well, people weren't getting better, or maybe they were. I mean, geez, I had Nagase on, and he was the one doctor in Rimby who just got railroaded for what he did there early on, and
was he sort of quote unquote experimenting and trying things, or
so he's a locum doctor. I don't know if you've heard that term.
I've heard it, but
well, I'll be the first to say, I had no idea what a locum doctor was. But essentially, in rural communities, they don't have full-time doctors. So they have these doctors, or they have full-time doctors, but in order to give, and I hope I'm not butchering this, to give holiday coverage, blah, 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 they have these locum doctors come in, and they go around the different communities and work these, like, shifts. Like
a circuit judge, circuit doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyways, in Rimby, he has 2 people get sick, and I'm sure there's more than that, with COVID-19 in the hospital. And this is like early 2021, mid-2021. And he prescribes ivermectin, but can't get any from the pharmacy. So he ends up going to seeing if he can find else. And they get
to the UFA or someplace like that. Whatever.
100%. And he gets them to sign off, and he prescribes them the animal ivermectin. Both survive, and then they railroaded him. Like, he got removed.
He sounds like the doctor
else.
in BC there, that small town that got burnt down. Same thing.
Yes.
Linton, the doctor there.
Hoff.
Yeah.
Hoff?
Yeah.
Charles Hoff?
Yeah.
Well, so you just go back and you go, if the goal, and I think this is it's a good question that you've brought up. What is the end game, right? And now this is where the conspiracies go. The end game is control.
People say the end game is control, fear, social credit, more automation. Yeah, and I'm not gonna go there. But
so you just come back.
Yeah.
What gives it fuel is, even 2 years into this thing, we won't admit that there's any early treatment that we could send people home with. Literally, the network of people at the very bottom, instead of the leader saying, this is what we're going to do, because you know what, we're a year in, Delta's starting to rage, even in this community. We saw it. We saw Delta go through. You could have just went, Mexico has an idea that seems to be working, we're going to implement it. And then even after that, you could have went, Pradesh, geez, I can't spit it out, India, they did the same thing. And then Japan had problems with the Moderna, and they did it.
And just listen to what Kenny said. I think it was last week. Last week he had one of his, press conferences, and he said he almost said, I'm pleading with Trudeau to approve Pfizer's new antiviral drug as quickly as possible under the Emergency Measures Act. So I'm like, okay, so now you've said that the emergency is bad enough that you're willing to test an experimental drug. Well, using the same logic, why wouldn't you let doctors, quote unquote, experiment? And trust me, they're not experimenting, injecting whatever chemicals in somebody's bloodstream. I mean, these are smart guys. So if a smart doctor says, you know what, this looks like this, and I think that the anti-malaria drug might work, perfect, because we're in emergency measures, and he can do it with complete informed consent from his patient. But they're blocked. It's silly that they're completely blocked.
Well, it's worse than that, Marty. It's our society. You think of like a guy like Byron Bridle, speaks up, says something ain't right, and what do? Absolutely just attack him,
cancel him, attack him.
Francis Christian in Saskatoon. He gets let go because of informed consent. He just we're not, and just raises awareness. Anyone who talked out about this, destroyed.
Yeah.
Like, you think of the Peter McCullough, the Robert Malone, and I mean, they've gained infamy with Joe Rogan podcast, right? But I mean, like, early on, Pierre Corey, they were just trying to offer solutions of listen,
because I'm taking parallels in my own world. I mean, if tomorrow somebody says you got to figure out how to inject carbon dioxide into the ground because that's how we're going to trap it, I'd be like, okay, what have we done that works before? What could I? And my engineering association and the act that I work under would say, Marty, you're a professional engineer. If your judgment says that this could possibly work, do it. And it's nefarious. I don't think at this point. I think the medical medical industry establishment could do some of that testing in the past. Somehow or other, I don't know why they're not allowed on this one. I mean, they must have done that kind of stuff when AIDS first came out. I mean, I'm sure when AIDS came out, they were doing what they talk about, drug cocktails, this and that, and why are they hamstringed now? I have no.
So here's
you're grinning like now you want to go conspiracy
theory. No. Honestly,
I
had a buddy reach out. I work in oil field as well, salesman, right?
Yeah.
He brought up a really good example about chemistries, right? Selling different companies chemistries, and I'm going to pick on CNRL. What the heck?
Yep.
We have an agreement with them. We sell them this chemistry, and over a 10-year span, what happens? CNRL slowly chips away at the price because you got competitors and whatever else. So in 10 years' time, your profit margin went from 100% markup to
the
2%.
Walmart effect. Yeah.
Right. So then what do? You take that off.
Formula or
call it something new. Take it offline so that you can get your profit margin back up.
Yep.
Don't you just
that's almost too obvious, and it probably is. I mean, yes, ivermectin and HCQ, and 2 cents a dose. I get it.
If this was
totally.
really, the sad thing is I always come back to, if this was really about saving human lives, I'm not knocking. It sounds like I'm being harsh on all of healthcare. I just look at our government and I go I'm really disappointed, because if this was truly the worst thing in the world, we'd be exploring everything.
We wouldn't have laid off workers who refused to get vaccinated.
100%.
That makes no sense.
And then invite them back when they realize, oh God, we have nobody.
And talk about a group that went from hero to zero in no time. And some of their attacks were violent.
Who's the next one? The truckers, right? The truckers going across the border. Well, now you got to be vaccinated. These guys have literally brought, I don't think people realize.
Brought us life-saving supplies for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
No thanks. No,
No. Yeah, I mean, I remember somebody tweeting, and I thought, wow, how harsh. Somebody literally saying that, it was in regards to, I don't know, a fireman who was in his 20 years and wasn't getting vaccinated and was going to get laid off. And this lady said, good for him. I don't want him working for us.
I had Eric Payne on here.
Yeah.
Eric Payne is a pediatric neurologist from the Children's Hospital in Calgary.
Yeah.
He comes on and just explains why he doesn't want to get himself vaccinated, why he doesn't want to get his kids vaccinated. I thought it was very well put together. Was there holes in his argument? I'm sure somebody can pick a hole or two, but he's just very calm, very nice guy. Honestly, I'm like, anytime my kid gets sick, I'd be bringing you. And I had people saying, I can't wait for this guy to be let go. Can't wait for him to be kicked out of Canada. I want him nowhere in Alberta.
And
like,
his 20 years of service
about?
he gets no credit built in his bank account for his years of service. I found that just so devastating that people were like that, that the fireman who ran into burning houses for 19 years, suddenly he's not as good as you because what did you do? What was your contribution to society? Oh, you got a vaccine. You got a jab in the arm. Bravo. Like, wow.
Well, so then you come back. I go, to me, the biggest problem we need to solve is how to stop that. Like, how do we bring people back? And your answer is leadership, which that's the quickest change. That absolutely.
It's going to happen. I mean, I think, God, it's not a coincidence that we have so many important leaders already stepping down and saying they're not going to run again. For the most part, they're opportunistic and they already see that they won't get reelected. Was it Pallister in Manitoba already announced he's not, and somebody in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and there's a couple of key people. I think Kenny's going to go down with a fight. He's not going to just. He's going to come back and try and get reelected. But I think we definitely need new leadership. And I think we need it across the board. Even some of the good leaders right now, I'm at the point where I just want them out. And people have said, like, what about so-and-so and what about so-and-so? I don't even want to make exceptions for anybody. You got us into this mess. You are not getting us out.
Yeah, we need. I'm seeing more and more people getting involved, which I think for a lot of years we just, we're on. I assume here in Alberta it felt like cruise control, right? Like we just roll along and.
A pig with lipstick showed up in whatever Olds, Alberta, and we'd elected him, right? I mean, it was pretty safe conservative writing, not so safe right now, especially. Well, that's a whole other topic. I mean, how do we affect some of that change? Somebody, look at the elections that we had in Calgary and Edmonton recently. And, in Calgary, we elected something. We don't even know who she is. She came out of nowhere. She's basically a Marxist, and she got elected as mayor of Calgary. And now her true colors are coming out. And somebody asked me, do you think the election was rigged? I'm like, no, that one wasn't rigged. Neither was the federal election. Trudeau's last election wasn't rigged. You can look at it statistically and see that it's not rigged. But conservatives don't know how to play the game. And the Liberals have no qualms about playing the game, about putting celebrities in places. Like, we Conservatives are too naive. We just think, well, the rules are this, and we should just play by the rules, and the smartest person should get elected. The Liberals are beating us hard. Well, I'm assuming you're somewhat conservative, but me as a conservative, I think the Liberals are beating us. They, as a crude example, they got no problem coming to an old age home with a bus and throwing everybody on board and bringing muffins and coffees and pretending they're going to go somewhere and then bringing all of them to the voting station and having them vote. I mean, is that illegal? Absolutely not. Is it despicable? A little bit, but it is what it is. So if we don't do something, and one of the things that I've been asked to do is, please, Martin, stop fighting with other conservatives, stop fighting with, and we got to be unified. And Kenny was fantastic at that.
We got to be unified, but we need somebody to stand up and unify us.
Yes.
That's such a bullshit.
And Kenny did a great job of that, 2 years ago. I'm just so on the fence with him.
I'm really frustrated with a lot of my conservative counterparts saying, we just got to listen. What everybody needs to do right now is pull our heads out of our collective asses, realize the only way this really starts to go the other way is when we start to get involved, start to figure out solutions, talk about it openly, and then maybe we can get going here.
Man, everything we're talking about here, we could talk for 3 hours because
we got no time.
I got no time limit, but we need to get involved. That's a question I've been asked a million times. Marty, why don't you run? And even no joke, so
why don't you run? Right?
We'll get to that, but I made a joke last year saying I might run, and Twitter's a fantastic place. I mean, I literally had real offers, a direct mail, people saying, we'll help you fundraise. This is how it works, blah, blah, blah. So why don't you run? Well, first of all, I'd have to erase 10 years of Martyisms on the internet. I mean, Not necessarily.
Do you think so?
I think so. Well, it depends on where.
Everybody says, and I have no idea. Okay.
I'm like Donald Trump, though. I'm going to be Donald Trump.
But Donald Trump became the president of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And honest to God, right now, Donald Trump is going to probably win the next election. I've never seen anything quite like what's going on in the United States right now.
Yeah, because
so everyone says you got to race who you are to get elected. I think that's where we're at in politics.
That's
right now.
not what worries me, though. That's not what worries me. What worries me is the immediate attacks you have. I mean, just joking, just testing the water, saying I'm gonna be. If I had my phone right now, I could show. I kept some emails because they're that offensive. And
I will agree with you on here.
Yeah.
I got a buddy, Ken Rutherford, who ran for the Mavericks, and he was the highest
scoring or
whatever
percentage vote getter
for the Mavericks in the election, right? And I've warned him, listen, you get involved, even if you win or anything, the attacks are going to come your way are not going to be good.
No.
But at the end of the day, that's where we are at in society. Like, it is not for the faint of heart, but that's no reason not to get involved.
Yeah, no. So it's not for the faint of heart, and I can, once maybe when so my youngest, so I have 4 kids, so when my youngest is in university and sort of out of the house, maybe I'll consider it. So that's one thing. But I am also sort of genuinely jaded about politics. I think the system is really, really, really broken, and I don't know if I'm even the guy to help fix it. I'm just not familiar enough with the workings of government and politics to be able to assist. So I'd rather get behind and help somebody,
I know, but this is what I was saying the other night. We all keep looking for that somebody. I'm not saying you're but I'm just saying in general. All of us are sitting here going, man, I'm just waiting for that one guy, and then when I see him, I'm going to put everything behind him. Or, I got 3 young kids, and in 10 years, when they're a little older, maybe then I'll consider it. The problem we got right now is I don't think we got 10 years. The way this keeps rolling, I'm like, what is going on? We need the best. We need people that think critically. And I'm not saying no liberal thinks critically. I'm just thinking, like, overall, the system is broken. It has a bunch of people that won't stick their neck out for anything.
The system just doesn't encourage critical thinking right now. It's all, it's popularity. It's popularity.
Well, I think the popularity can come for people that think independently of what is going on.
Donald Trump was an interesting phenomenon, wasn't he? I mean, I just wish he had gotten off Twitter and shut up a little bit,
We all say it.
Yeah. I mean, I got no problem with Trump. I have no problem with, my whole life I've worked with people that I call sort of mavericks, and I prefer somebody who's a little bit on the maverick side but passionate versus somebody that has no fire in their belly, and but more specifically, I mean, I prefer people who say what they're going to, or do what they're going to say.
We don't have a lot of that. Right?
We don't have a lot of that. And Trudeau, people love Trudeau, but he never does what he says he's going to do. And Trump was the opposite. He said all these sort of ignorant things, and he wasn't very popular, but behind the scenes, I kind of think he did the right thing.
Well,
he just needed to get off Twitter.
Everybody, and yet Twitter probably got him elected in the beginning, right? Like, I mean,
True. It goes
at the
both
beginning,
ways.
You're like, holy crap, is a president, like, is he allowed to say that, right? Is he allowed to just attack and, like, be, like, on the offensive? And I mean, did everything he do go as planned? No. Did he create some division in his own country? Yes, but honestly,
would we call him a great uniter, though? Was he more divisive than uniting, or how would you characterize him in the end?
It's funny. I'm married to an American. I find it really hard to comment on a different country and whether he was uniting or divisive. I know everyone says the exact same thing, though. If he just shut up, he was a great president.
Great president.
Because he got the United States going.
He got him into trade deals. He got peace agreements.
100%.
He got manufacturing going. Absolutely.
Unemployment went down. I mean, everybody was working.
That was a fascinating tweet that I did about 4 months ago. I just asked a question, why are Americans dealing with the pandemic differently than Canadians? And, we've always known, I mean, you've said it, there's cultural differences between Americans and Canadians, but but they're more profound than I thought. When people say that the love of liberty in the U.S. is so strong that's why they're resisting some of the measures that we've imposed here, and they're
in their bloodline, they fought for freedom.
Bingo.
Right now, us Canadians go, when you say that, yeah, we didn't fight for it. Well, no, but if you go back in our bloodline, you have some tough hombres, especially in this part of the country, who left everything to come to a barren world, minus 40, survive it.
Sure, but we're still, yes, but that came out in that question. We're still fundamentally, what's the word? Not servants, but to the king and to the crown. We're not totally free. We're not as free. We were given a freedom by the British Crown, but it's not. We didn't fight for it like the Americans. The Americans fought it, grabbed it.
Yeah,
it's subtle, but it makes
it's a subtle difference.
Yeah, but what you said about us being here, I mean, my ancestors that are from here, yes, we are a tough breed and independent, and now we're getting into the cultural difference between an Albertan and somebody else from Canada, which is another topic I love to talk about, which is my views on Confederation have changed in the last 30 years. Boy, have they changed. And when you talk about, at its core, Canada is an experiment. It's a unification of 10 very different regions. I used to naively think that there was only two. I mean, I speak French, and I have a French Canadian background, and I used to defend the Quebecers. When the Quebecers would say they had a distinct society, I was willing to back them up on that. 30 years later, after having lived in 5 provinces and worked across the country, there's 10 regions here. Saskatchewan is as different from Newfoundland as the Arctic, as New Brunswick, as BC. And so the experiment was to bring these 10 provinces under the umbrella of an Ottawa that sort of ensured fairness and collaboration and stuff like that. And God, look at this. Again, we come back to those leaders that can find the win-win. So, Alberta's battling Ottawa. I mean, we're in a pandemic, and we're still in the pandemic, still not united enough, and we're still battling each other. And so, that's a whole topic. I've kind of given up. If I run on politics, some people are not going to like my platform because I'm becoming very much a separatist when it comes to Alberta. I've given up.
I come back to what me and Ken talked about, because Ken came on here. So, the highest voted maverick in the last election. And he came on and said very similar things to you. Just, he's got 6 kids. And he's full-time professor, full-time business owner, full-time. And to me, everyone has all these ideas of why they can't do it. And once again, Marty, we just met. I find it funny how quickly I just pushing on you. But I hear tons of people say what you're saying. So this is talking to you, but talking to the general audience.
So I might not be so much of a voice in the wilderness at this point, is what you're saying.
I think,
and the attacks. If I'm worried about the attacks, but if I get attacked, actually, when I think about it, I have enough defenders.
100%.
I have enough like-minded people, and some of them will help me block, some of them will defend, some of them will be deployed to do whatever.
I think all of us have this idea.
Sean's trying to convince me to run, folks.
I think we all have this idea that we need 97% of people to like your platform and like how you say it, and that's how you're going to vote it in. And the longer this goes along, the more I go, no, I think what we all want is somebody who has a little bit of character, some values, and just speaks truth. Just even if it doesn't align with everything, I just want I want transparency.
Yep.
I want somebody who just lays it. This is why we're doing this. This is why we can't do that. You got to think about these. We have no politicians doing that, and then all these people, all of them, they all say what you're saying. Like in 5 years, or there's better candidates. If some candidate comes on, well, the candidates aren't coming. They're us. They're literally all of us. And I'm speaking to you, but I'm also speaking to the audience.
Yeah. I wouldn't even be able to help myself. I would be that guy. There's no way I could be anything but. If I was in a room and we had an objective and I'd be in the room trying to find the common ground. I mean, I spent a career doing that.
Well, then to me, it's just like, you hear
Sorry,
that?
Karen, we're running.
I certainly, it's funny. It's funny when,
it's a good, I want to go back there because you're helping me out. Here's the other thing I wanted to, that I've said to a couple of people. The battle is exhausting. I'm already starting to get tired. I used to tell people would say, why do you do that? Why do you care? I'd be like, and so the easy answer at first was for me. And then I became a father. And when you're a father, man, that really changes things. Like I want my sons to have the life I had. So I fight for them. But now, and my daughter, but now that they're getting 18, 19, I'm actually kind of saying I got to pass the baton to you guys and you're on your own. As a parent, I had 18, 19 years to prepare you, and then I can't be defending you. But then I can't help myself. Once in a while, I come back to that. I love this country. I hate what's going on with this country, and we need to get together and fix it. And if that means we need leaders, and I've always said it, leaders who are willing to share information and find the common ground. And now you just made me realize I'm one of those guys.
Well, and
I hope I'm one of those guys.
Here's my fear, right? My fear is this going away in a month? No. Is COVID going away by summertime? I really hope. But hope at this point, I was hoping last January. And so
Hope's a nice girl's name, but it's not a plan.
That's right. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And McCullough told me when I had him on the first or second time, he said 3 to 5 years. And I went, well, and just look at Trudeau's plan on how many booster shots he's bought and everything else. And the fact that all of Canada isn't revolting at the fact of 5 to 11-year-olds being, and Quebec, all the curfew stuff, taxing the unvaccinated. Like, you look at it and you go, is this going away in a month? Maybe we all got to stop lying to ourselves and go, the way it goes away is when we all start to get involved.
Which is probably a pretty good segue into where we are today and some of the questions you had at the beginning, on the stats in Alberta and what Alberta Health is doing and vaccination and all of that. I think, it's...
Sure. I want to read you a quote because
Okay.
I know you didn't drive. I didn't plan this. I had no idea this was going to come up. I had no idea what half these conversations are going to go. But I look for wisdom in different spots. I was saying this. I was at Brownfield a few nights ago, and I made the joke that wisdom, we look for it in things like the Bible or, Jordan Peterson's a good one that I find a lot of wisdom in.
God love him.
I found probably one of the best things on my outlook on life through a book called Jurassic Park, which is funny. Michael Crichton, right?
Like the real Jurassic Park, like the original
book. Yes. Yeah. National bestseller, right? Straight linearity is an artificial way of viewing the world. Real life isn't a series of interconnected events happening one after another like beads strung on a necklace. Life is a series of encounters where one event can change all the events that fall in an unpredictable way. And it just dawned on me when you're sitting there going, well, geez, I didn't really think you're helping me. I'm going, oh, geez, I didn't mean for that to, it's just, I approach all these interviews. I have no idea where they're going to direct me. I go back to Roger Hodgkinson. He sat in your seat, and I always joke, like he was so passionate in that interview. I was like, oh my God, what have I
unleashed here?
Yeah. And it's changed everything because I'm like, okay, we got to stop dancing this. We got to stop trying to act like we can two-step all the problems we have going on in this country. And my fear is if we continue to two-step, there's tons of people leaving. They're just like, and those are some of the best and brightest.
I immediately knew you were going there. I mean, the brain drain is no joke, and the brain drain, cultural drain, intellectual drain. I mean, there are people leaving in droves.
From Canada.
Yep.
Like, we have to acknowledge that.
It's in fact, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I mean, one of the last companies I worked for, we were trying to advance a pretty major project in Nova Scotia, an LNG facility. And so we were meeting with bankers from all over the world because we needed to raise $10 billion. And we flew to Malaysia, and we met with some big banks there, and they literally said that they listened to our sales pitch, but they weren't interested in doing business in Canada. Too risky. And they almost used the word third world. And I was like, wow, bankers from Malaysia consider Canada a third world country? Where would you rather do business? And they said, Brazil, South Africa, Israel, Mexico. They had a long list. And then when I look at our people that are leaving, that are going, where are they going? They're going to all those places. Yeah, it's wow.
The problem.
Okay, now you're getting me depressed. Let's bring it back to more.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mean to get you depressed.
Yeah.
I just mean for everybody listening, because I'm talking even out loud. I do the Jordan Peterson thing a lot. Ever since I heard him say it, I'm like, oh, geez, he thinks with speaking, or talks his thoughts.
Yeah.
And so it's just as raw for me, right? I'm being just as hard. I have to acknowledge some things. Like, things need to start changing. Otherwise, we're going down a dark path. Now, to transition, you brought up, and this is where you really came across a lot of people's paths, and it's taken me an hour and a bit to get you here. But you bring up AHS and the data. Let's go into that. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been seeing with the data and what's concerned you, and just your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm really immersed in the data. I look at the data. One of the things that I'm popular with is I look at not just the data that AHS provides, but I try to look for trends and comparisons and put context to the data. I mean, there's lots of people that just say, here's a graph of cases. I'm like, well, that's fine, but what does the graph of cases plotted against the vaccine uptake show you, for instance? So I'll talk about a lot of things. So one of the things I don't like about AHS for certain is that they're all over the place with their data. There's so many inconsistencies in the data that, and when you're a data scientist, the first step is to look at data and then do what we call curation, give it a quality check, and then look to make sure that it's good data that you can use for. And very early on, I started finding all sorts of inconsistencies. So an example of an inconsistency is, if somebody is, if you plot the onset of a case and then the onset of a recovery, one minus the other should be about 10, 14 days, let's say. So after I've had 100 cases, I should have 100 cases resolved 14 days later because COVID's run its course. And then we were seeing, those two curves were reaching 20, 30, 40 days. So the implication of that is either you got people that are still considered sick and you haven't released them from the hospital, or you got people, anyways, it's an example. And I was finding inconsistencies like that all the time that I was bringing up literally to AHS, and they're terrible at acknowledging anything. Other inconsistencies is things like the number when a death occurred. I mean, I'm still trying to get them to reconcile the fact that, they originally they said there was 1,000 deaths in 2020, and then they revised it to 1,214, then they revised it to another number. And then people say, well, why is that important? It's like, it's totally important because, again, if you're trying to measure the effectiveness of something, you need to see, are deaths diminishing or increasing, and then deaths are used as ratios. Death versus cases, things like that. So I spend a lot of time identifying just inconsistencies, but the other thing I do mostly is look for trends and try to see if things are working, and I like to just I like to provide information that the government's just not providing. So I have to reconstruct some stuff and use their own data to provide the information in a new way for people to try to understand. An example right now is the vaccinated rate, right? Like this whole the crisis of the vaccinated, this whole thing that the vaccinated the crisis of the unvaccinated. See, in my mind, it's already a crisis of the vaccinated. But as soon as they started saying that, I'm like, whoa, that's not what the data is showing. Like, why would the government present something that's not even in the evidence, So I started trending the number of cases that were being admitted, the number of active cases, and the number of cases in hospital on their vaccine status, but not just giving a snapshot in time, but giving a trend. The government never gives a trend. They always tell you today, today 62% of people in the hospital are vaccinated. I predicted that 2 months ago, because you can just plot points and see where this is going. So many months ago, I immediately started showing and tweeting about the fact that the vaccine is not working. And I get censored for saying that, but there was even buried in the government's data, it was pretty obvious that you needed the booster, and as soon as you got shortly after you got your first shot, within 14 days, there was a huge amount of people that got sick after their first shot, and they're considered unvaccinated. I didn't like that. So, I'm digressing, but the data.
No, but
the data. I did so two things. One was just find the inconsistencies in the data, plain and simple. Number two is present the data that exists in giving it context to help people digest it. And then the third one is literally take the data, but find other ways to present the data to really look for the deep problems, And like I've been saying right now, for instance, I firmly, truly believe that the booster, the spike of Omicron and other things started happening right after we started mass boosting. Speaking of Omicron, that's another big one. I mean, I pointed that out. Like, they can't even tell us what percentage of cases are Omicron. There's less Omicron cases than there are Delta cases, 6 months ago. So I did that last week. I'm like, you got 15,000 new cases in the last 2 weeks, let's say, but only 5,000 Omicron cases. So what does that mean about the other 10? They're making an assumption that the other 10 are also Omicron, but it's like they could be Omicron or they could be the original variant making a comeback. But either way, I don't give a shit, because you're now telling me I don't believe you can make policy based on data, because you don't even have the data. It's right there for all of us to see. You don't even have the correct data to make policy. So to tell me that Omicron is the biggest wave, it's not validated by your own data. There is a wave going on. I have no doubt about it. Well, actually, I'm even questioning that some days.
Well, are people getting sick? Yes. But after that sentence, you go, I don't know. Like, I mean, what should we say after that? Like, right now, I'll speak kids, right? One kid gets COVID, or their parent gets COVID, and then they're close contacts, and then everybody's sending home or shutting down everything. I mean, here in Alberta, World Juniors, they get sick, sure.
What a disaster that was.
What a disaster. Maybe it was the best thing that ever happened, because you know what? It woke a lot of people up. Everybody's like, oh, what are we doing? The problem I really see, and then I come back to the data. Let's stick on the data for a second here. What's unnerving about it is they're doing this like sleight of hand thing where they don't think anybody's going to notice. Nobody's paying that close attention. And what I appreciate about what you're doing, Marty, is you're paying attention.
Totally.
And by doing that, everybody gets to see, why does it matter that a person that they call unvaccinated, even though they're getting their shots? It's like, well, it does matter. I mean, it's straight there.
Well,
we got our leader of the country saying we're going to make life difficult.
Up until this week, there was three categories. So there was fully vaccinated, partially vaccinated, and unvaccinated. And then we know that in the unvaccinated, you have people that got it within 14 days of the first shot. They changed the definition. They got it within 14 days of the second shot. So I gave an example on Twitter. It's like, this is how silly this rule is, right? So Jack and Jill get their first shot on January 1st. And then 4 months go by, and Jack doesn't get his second shot, but Jill gets her second shot. So after, the 3 month period. And then 10 days later, Jack gets sick, and so does Jill. Not so within the 14 days of the second shot. So by definition, Jack is unvaccinated, even though he has 2 doses, and Jill is partially vaccinated, even though she only has 1 dose, and they both have COVID. So it's like that statistically makes no sense. Now, if you're doing it because the vaccine is ineffective in those first 14 days, as your definition, I don't give a shit. Leave the data as is, so that it becomes absolutely blatantly evident that the vaccine is ineffective within the 14 days. Your reasoning for doing it is correct, perhaps, but the way you're doing it is incorrect. or nefarious, and you're actually trying to hide it. I mean, and the 14 days within the first dose was interesting because the graph went on forever. And at first I'm like, how come there's never any cases? I'm like, well, of course there's never any cases there because nobody ever makes it past 90 days after their first dose, because then somebody grabs you and shoves a second dose in you. So that graph is only partially useful. So now you go and look at the second one. And by the way, all those graphs that were so useful disappeared 3 days ago. So that's an example. And now I'm getting passionate because, I look at the data so hard that, and a lot of the data, I have to download it and then re-upload it in my spreadsheet. So an example is the ICU cases. And I brought that up. And even David Staples, the journalist, and has like, is that for real? I'm like, it's totally for real. So, Alberta breaks down ICUs by COVID, non-COVID, and open, free, right? And I wish that even within COVID, they'd say vaccinated or un, but it's kind of irrelevant. And so every day I plot those numbers and I become so familiar with it. And then I think it was at the beginning of last week, I opened the spreadsheet or download the data, open the spreadsheet, and I'm like, whoa, 68, 65, 64. I was sure it was 82, 81, and 83 last week. That's how much I remember the numbers. So now I download the spreadsheet and I look at it side by side. I'm like, holy shit, man. They revised all the ICU numbers for the entire year downwards. And I'm like, it might be a perfectly valid reason.
Yeah.
But tell us why and make that a note. Because right now, you just lost credibility. And then when I post that up, everybody's like, oh, well, of course, last year's data now, it was useful to say that there was a lot of people in the ICU last year and they had the number to back it up. Now that narrative's kind of gone, you put the numbers back to where they actually were, lower, so that now if Omicron kicks in, now you can have a better chance of showing an overuse of the ICUs because of Omicron. Is it that nefarious? I don't know, but
it sticks out.
Oh, it totally sticks out.
I've been just quietly. I'm not a data cruncher, but I deal with data in my job every single day, right? So I stumbled upon Canada epidemiology like for our entire country, and it shows confirmed COVID-19 cases reported to the PAHC by vaccination status as of December 25th, 2021. And it goes back to, I think it's December 20th of 2020. Anyways, regardless, it shows deaths. And I was like, oh, that by unvaccinated, cases not yet protected, partially vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Well, all right. So, I mean, when you first look at it, man, it looks bad. It's like, holy crap, 8,000 unvaccinated deaths. This is of today. I'm looking at it right now. And only 1,100 fully vaccinated, and then, 700 cases not yet protected, and another 700 partially vaccinated. But they don't do week by week, here's what it is. They just keep adding to the totals.
Totally.
So the unvaccinated is giant.
Because it includes a portion of time where you couldn't even be vaccinated.
That's right.
Or it includes kids that can't be vaccinated, whatever, absolutely. Alberta uses the 120-day aggregate, the last 120 days all the time, which is annoying. And I don't even think they do a good job of properly managing that. Let's be realistic, Dr. Hinch. I'll just bring it to the last 30 days. Why are you purposely doing 120? What's the medical or logical? As an engineer, I would never do that. I might on some cases, what's the quality of my product for the last 120 days on average, but I'm more interested in the last week. And 120 is a bizarre, arbitrary number that suits.
Well, I think in the oil field, why lots of this bugs Albertans and Saskatchewan people a little bit crazy is because in the oil field we deal with lots and lots of data points. Engineers specifically, but I mean salesmen and one of my job, that's what we do.
Well, every on my way here, you see the evidence of oil. I've forgotten just how much oil history there is in the Lloydminster area, but driving in the field, you see all the 400 barrel tanks and the separators and pump jacks, and in every building, I guarantee you, there's a clipboard with a log sheet, and the job of an operator every day is just to record stuff, and then he always wonders why. Me, 30 years ago, Marty would collect all those sheets and then enter the number manually and look for trends. Well, I did two things. So as a as an engineer, you have to sort of have a problem. So if you have a problem to solve, why is that separator foaming or overflowing, or why is that pump going down all the time? So then you try and formulate a theory as to why, and then you decide what data might validate your theory or not. Today with Alberta, or with data, you could just dump it all. God, I wish I still worked at IBM, because I worked at IBM for a year and we had artificial intelligence there, and we were working on the concept of don't even formulate a problem or a theory, just let the computer look at all the data, and the computer can spit out millions of correlations, and the computer can literally tell you what it thinks is something unusual, and then the human can investigate. But I love data, and that's what I've been doing with Alberta.
Well,
yeah,
and for the oil field workers, right, that get to do that, you have a problem, a root problem, you try and solve it, and then as you try and solve it, you could splinter off into a bunch of problems, and then you evaluate those, and you assess, is what I'm doing for the benefit of the good, or am I creating a worse problem? And if you are, then you go back to the drawing board.
Am I trying to solve the right problem? Maybe I picked the wrong problem. Maybe the real problem is something else. Oh yeah, there's so many.
So for me, out west in particular, this is why we're so stubborn on this, is because we just look at the data and we go, I got tons of people who look at the data. You do an exceptional job, and you just look at it and you go, yeah, that makes sense. And then people lose it because they're like, well, why do you get to analyze data?
And
it's like, well,
that's a whole interesting phenomena, right? Which we didn't even talk about, mass psychosis, and I'm not going to talk about it, but I think there is some mass psychosis, because lately I think we are in the end game, and I'm showing the data, and when I show the data, and like I said earlier, I'm either playing the role of the opposition or the calm head who's just validating, and I get attacked. I get attacked by friend and foe, but I got people who just turn on me and it's just like, you're wrong, and why would you do this, and what, I'm like, you're upset that I'm pointing out that the vaccine might not work. Wow.
What did Chris
understand.
Chris Montoya tell me? Chris Montoya, professor from, he's been on the podcast a couple times. If you have anger or hatred, you're being manipulated. As simple as that, right?
Right.
You got to learn to understand your. And I'm not sitting here saying I don't get angry. I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect.
You choose to be angry.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're
Yeah, and otherwise you're being manipulated by the situation, by things. You just have to start to look at things, and like when you let the data just. And in the beginning, once again, I'll bring up Ken, because he's been on here multiple times, and we've had our discussions. We're in a book club together. We've argued about a lot of things, and he's a data guy, and he's just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this is like, we can have the stories, and absolutely people are getting sick and everything else, but look at the data. This is shutting down our entire economy, and our kids and everything else.
And whether it's mass psychosis or just propaganda 101 or other things, I saw a video not too long ago. Somebody shared it with me, and I think it was it was an ex KGB guy or somebody being quite honest. He's like, back in the days, people didn't believe anymore. They didn't believe that it could be going on. They didn't believe that there were prison camps. They didn't believe that you could end up in the gulag. They didn't believe any of that. They were defensive until he said, until I kicked you in the face and threw you into that cell, and then you went, holy shit, this is real. So, it's a
person who is.
I wish I understood that, because I have no idea how people get there.
A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him.
Right.
That's from that video you're talking about of the KGB.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point, he's saying, I literally have to take you to the gulags to show it to you, and then you may still not fully understand.
Yeah.
And like the data that's pouring out everywhere, the fact that so much is going on, certain people just turn off. So many people are tired of talking COVID. I'm tired of talking COVID. I got to be honest. Like, I want to move on to bigger, better things. But
we're in the end game. I hope we're in the end game. God, I hope we're in the end game.
Can we talk about? Have I brought up the truckers with you yet?
We mentioned at the beginning. It was on the news when I was driving down. So
yeah, 23rd here coming. What do you think the impact of them bogging down everything? And you're talking more specific, not the change, not the flip flop. You're talking about the strike or the slowdown or whatever. The slow roll across Canada that's going to start here on, I believe. Wait, I have this written down. I believe it's February. January 23rd. January 23rd, truckers slow roll from as many border points to slow down major road transportation routes across Canada.
Yeah, no, that won't even be a delayed impact. That'll be a pretty instantaneous impact. I mean, we're already seeing it. My wife was out yesterday and came back saying that certain groceries are already off the shelf, and the supply chain impacts are across the board now, totally. And thank God for the truckers. I think they should do that. I mean, that's an example. That's a good example. We're all going to suffer for it. But back to the gulag guy, what's the equivalent of me bringing you to the jail and shoving you in there? I don't know, because I've said that before. I said people need to hurt. I think I even heard you say that. I mean, people got stranded. People took the jab, went to Mexico, got stranded in Mexico, got inconvenienced, got extra bucks, but still came back, said it was worth it. I'm like, wow, you're that demoralized now that even a shitty vacation in Mexico is better than none. So is $5 avocados and a $20 head of lettuce and everything else gonna kick people in the into reality? I don't know.
Nick Hudson told me once that people will come back one at a time. So it's going to be different for everyone else. For a lot, getting 2 doses, they thought this was the end of it, and now they're saying booster up, and oh, by the way, maybe more shots than that. A lot of people are like, fuck that.
Well, I mean, I look at a guy like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson's a perfect example.
He came back. I'm surprised he even fell for it, because I think he's even admitting to himself, how did I fall for this? How did I not see this coming, right? 2 shots, sure, I bought it, but now leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah, but
said.
go with Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, if you've listened to Joe, he was literally going to get the shot. And then how did it go? He got sick, or somebody's going to correct me on this. I'll get a text about this, but he was literally going to go get it. And then he got booked into something, ended up missing it. And within a week, things had happened, and he went, I don't think we're going to get it.
Yeah.
And then he ends up getting COVID. And now, look at if he had went and gotten the shot, maybe he still speaks openly about it. Maybe he is Jordan Peterson. But instead, he goes through COVID. He becomes what he is. CNN blasts him for horse dewormer. He brings on Sanjay Gupta, and all this tidal wave of information starts getting shared. Up until that point,
and
Robert
they couldn't
Malone
bury it. They couldn't
bury it anymore. And the harder they try and bury it, the more publicity it gets, because people are like, "What the heck do they keep talking about?" And then you go listen to them.
Totally.
And it's like, does everything McCullough and Robert Malone and these guys say, is it bang on 100% truth? Well, I'm going to say it's higher than zero. Not higher than zero, higher than 50%. Like, it's a good majority of what they're
McCullough's impressive.
Oh, my God. It's
like,
brain
you sit there with your Google machine, and every time he mentions a paper just off the cuff, you just go, holy shit, it does exist. And he's even got the authors right. That guy's mind is a trap.
And here's what's even more impressive about Marty. If I email him right now, within half an hour, he will email me back. I don't know how he does that. And I'll be like, you want to come on the podcast? Yeah, sure. Could you do today at 2 o'clock? And I'm like, I guess so. And I know listeners now will probably text going, we should get McCullough back on. Well, we can. And then when you bring him on, I don't know when he sleeps. And I don't know how he does that, because there's so many people, like Robert Malone has been on Joe Rogan as well. You try and email Robert Malone, no knock on you. No. Rob, he ain't emailing you back. McCullough will email me back, and then we'll come on, and you'll be like, oh, what's going on? And he'll rattle off 17 new studies.
Like he's prepared, like he's studied the night before kind of thing.
Right, which means, I don't get it.
People like that exist. I mean, can you imagine? I think it's one of your dreams is to bring Jordan Peterson, right?
Yes.
And I mean,
number one goal, if you're listening, Jordan, I need to get you on here.
Guys that have a mind that is just a trap, and mine's good. My mind's good. I'll admit that. I'll brag about it. I got a pretty sharp mind, but I wouldn't want to debate. I wouldn't want to debate Jordan Peterson. I would. I'd try it. But, the way he remembers facts, the way he can formulate his thoughts. But I want to come back to McCullough just for a second. He annoyed me, though. Did he annoy you at all? Or because I don't know what it was about him, but I guess I sympathize because he had to be careful in the beginning. He was kind of a whistleblower. But when I looked at him, I'm like, you should have been a better whistleblower. I kind of think he was a little bit late being a whistleblower. The way he was talking, I'm like, you knew about this early on. Now, maybe I'm just not aware of how much whistleblowing he was doing early on, or how much pushback he was getting. I'm sure he got a ton of pushback.
I sympathize. I've gone through my ups and downs on all these guys.
Yeah.
And Paul Alexander, who I just had on, Dr. Paul Alexander, when I first listened to him talk, I was like, do I want to bring him on? And I apologize, Paul, if you're listening. Like at the beginning, I just, I don't know. And then I had him on. Man, he was well spoken.
Yeah.
And I think I bring up with him something along like, people think, because I've been told, like, you're making millions off this. You're just looking for the clicks. You just want, and then he just goes into how difficult it's been. And I go, I got no idea, right? Like, the small amount of harassment I've taken, and it's more than some, and it's certainly less than a lot. It's not a comfortable feeling to be put in a position where people think,
even if you don't think it's going to put your career at risk, it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable.
Totally.
We all want to be loved. We all want to be liked.
Totally.
This goes back to the schoolyard, and you don't want to be. You want to be in the in crowd, and the in crowd right now is get your vaccination. Don't worry about showing papers. That's like, what's the big deal about that? We did this once upon a time with all these different things, and it's not a big deal. And don't worry about the economy. It's going to be fine. And the truckers, just get your shot. It's like, at some point, we can all agree something is going on here, that we all have to get back together and go, no more government. Like, this is beyond far enough. And we have to start taking a different approach of how we're going to get out of this thing. For a lot, it's just like flick the light switch and away we go. And maybe that is. But we have to start approaching this like it is going to be done here in April, May.
So back to those three things: government, opposition, scientists, and media. So now we got media. So now we got guys like Joe Rogan that are busting the mainstream media. So that's good. Now we got scientists that have been quiet. Some have been quiet intentionally. Scientists are scientists, head down and do their thing. But now we really have doctors coming out. So now we need either a new crop of politicians or even a handful of politicians that are currently now starting to question. And I think that's starting to happen.
It is starting to happen.
There's some Alberta MLAs that actually wrote letters to Hinshaw and to Kenny saying, we want to see this data now, because they've listened to guys like me. I mean, I got connections to some other MLAs, and they've asked me a couple of questions, and they've come back because they know I have data, so I'm helping them so they can ask the questions. The opposition right now is hopeless. I don't know what we do for a stronger opposition, but yeah. So I can see. Okay, yeah. So a few politicians coming out, some new ones joining in, some new celebrities, some people. We got to recruit people.
Well, I tell you
everybody said we'd love to see Jordan Peterson run for politics, but I'm not sure he'd be good.
I'm not sure he'd be good, but
yeah.
But the thing is my fear for Canadians is we focus, and I've said this a few too many times. I'll keep saying it. My fear for Canadians is we focus too much on that. Joe Rogan talking about it. 100% agree.
Yeah.
But Joe Rogan's in the States, and the States are going to take care of themselves, and we all assume then, us being the little brother, they will come up and solve our problems. And I keep saying the only way we solve our problems is we solve the problems.
We solve our problems, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need more Canadians talking about this, and there are becoming more.
And that's why I'm here. Actually, my wife even asked that yesterday. Why are you going up there? For many reasons, right? I mean, one is I will never turn down an opportunity. I've learned that a long time ago. Canadians are terrible at just missing opportunities. So, and I'm not talking financial gains or anything like that. An opportunity is meeting a person is an opportunity, period. So I had the opportunity to come here, but deep down, we are in a battle. I'm doing my bit to get us out of this. We're having a great discussion. I'm going to come back out of this energized, and you're giving me food for thought. I'm sure I am to you.
Every guest always gives me.
And we are doing it to the audience that's listening, and that's why I did it. But in the broader picture, yes, we're battling. I'm battling. I'm absolutely battling. We got to get out of COVID. I think we should have gotten out of this a year ago, longer than a year ago. I think Redmond had the plan. I think we should have gotten out of this a year ago. And I quite honestly think we're almost back. At Christmas, we were back to where we were 2 years ago. We've not progressed in any way, shape, or form. And we're going to accidentally get out of it because of Omicron. Omicron is just a natural evolution that occurred somewhere, and it followed biology, which is, the virus wants to live. It doesn't have any intention of killing its hosts. because then that defeats the whole purpose. So it gets milder, more infectious, and it goes on living forever and ever. And the end game is not eradicating COVID, because we've never eradicated any disease other than, some will argue, chickenpox, or not chickenpox, smallpox. Even by the real definition of eradicated, still exists. Polio, all the other ones, they exist plenty. Yeah. Where was that going with this?
No,
I'm well, thanks for having me, and thanks for
well,
chatting.
I tell you what, I got to do the fans some service here.
Yeah.
We got to do the Crewmaster Final Five. We got to make sure that we include all the people that hammered you when you mentioned you're coming on, and hammered me when I mentioned you were coming on.
Sure. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not leaving. Didn't make it sound like I'm leaving, man. I got lots of time. I love driving. I'm just going home.
Well, it's been a. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy it with real people. Where the tough thing I find, and I say this to people, that you got to interject. You got to have your thoughts. Blah 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 blah. It's like it's great. You get on a Zoom call. You start talking over one another, and it's just the internet, and it's just how the video lags.
And you don't get the same body language.
No.
I mean, if you're sort of motioning forward slightly, and it's a visual cue that you want to say something, it's way better in person. Way better in person.
Oh,
totally.
There's nothing can replace this. I always say in sales, and I don't know the numbers anymore. It's something like 7% is what you say. Another 30% is how you say it, and then the rest is body language. Well, in a video, you get none of that. Phone call, you certainly get none of that.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't tell if I'm joking.
And texts are brutal.
Oh, Twitter, right? Like, you can't tell if somebody's
150 characters or whatever it is. Yeah.
And you can't tell if somebody's actually physically mad at you or just asking a question. I got blocked by a lady because basically, and she's a media person, and she was talking about. There's not two sides to a story. And I replied back, there's always two sides. And she said, okay, pregnant and I said, well, I assume, and it may be a terrible answer. All I said was, can't conceive, question mark. I was just like, I don't know.
Adopting, whatever.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like, and I got blocked. She just blocked me. And called me a whatever. It doesn't matter. And then people attacked me for saying that. And I was like, well, to me, I think you have to be, and I get criticized of this lots, that I don't listen to both sides and I'm not whatever. And it's like, well, do I have a bias? Absolutely. Sure. I can admit that. It's just that there's so much going on right now where we don't want to listen to the other side. And I try and listen to the other side.
That's another problem. It is. I joke about entering the liberal echo chambers or the vax chambers, but we need more dialogue. And so this again, that's another reason to come here, is just to act out the behavior that we want.
What are your thoughts as a Canadian on, I assume lots of people have seen this, I'll read it off, but the MP John Brassard video that went around saying Health Canada collected 33 million mobile devices to monitor Canadians' movement. They spied on without any knowledge the government of Canada was accessing their data. Yeah. And they only found this out because they had a request to do it for the next 5 years.
Canada's equivalent of the Snowden case or whatever. I mean, I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked. What's the question? I'm not. I'll tell you what. I mean, I worked for a year at IBM, and so that was.
What year was that?
It was about 2016, 2017.
Oh, okay.
So I just finished working for TransCanada, and that was after we killed Energy East, and another big fiasco. Worked $1 million a day we spent on engineering. We got it to $1.2 billion and then killed by the government. Like literally killed, and they'll make all sorts of excuses that the economics killed it. I'm like, yeah, you made the economic hurdles impossible to anyways. So then I needed a bit of break, and I went over to work for IBM. They have a technology called Watson, artificial intelligence, and trying to figure out how to use artificial intelligence to solve oil and gas problems. IBM's present in hundreds of countries around the world, and I met some fascinating people, and I learned about Twitter actually at the time, and how IBM was partnered with Twitter, and just how they were mining Twitter data and phone data. Your phone, some people call it a phone as an engineer. I call it 14 sensors. It's a motion sensor, a temperature sensor, a gyroscope, an altimeter. If you touch it, it's even, it's a sensor. It's a sensor in your pocket, and the data from that sensor is shared by more people than you can possibly imagine. So when you look at Google Map and it says that there's traffic up ahead, and it starts going red on Google Map or whatever application, that's because whoever's running that application is getting all that data. They don't know that it's your phone specifically, but they know that it's a phone that is not moving. It's not that the car stalled. They know that there's 50 phones that are not moving, so then they go red on that. And so you have no more privacy. In fact, it's getting even scarier. When I worked at IBM, I went to a conference in Vegas where we saw what companies were doing with artificial intelligence. And I just thought, man, you'll never be able to walk into a store and not be convinced to buy something, because every deal will be tailored to you so specifically. You already see it on your...
You're talking Minority Report.
Well, I mean, I watched a TV show. Me and my sons the other day watched something about the Indonesian tsunami. I can't remember whether it was Survivor or whatever, some movie like that. And we're just talking, and then Patrick the next day goes, "Hey, check this out, Dad." And he's got something to do with Indonesia on his phone. Trip to Indonesia. It's like the phone's listening while you're not even using it. So what was the reason? I mean, the government does it. It's nefarious on the government's part. They're monitoring our phones. But
you look at it and go,
it's inevitable. They're monitoring your phone. They're monitoring you on your traffic patterns. They can do it. They're not supposed to do it. I know they're doing. I should be more upset, but I guess I've been. For me, my wife would be upset. My wife still tries to be private. She doesn't even like what I do, that I'm on Twitter and things like that. I'm like, Karen, we're well past that. Like, the government knows what I'm doing.
I keep saying, people are like, you need to put your phone in a bag or leave it here, and I'm like, listen, I talk on a podcast openly in my thoughts about anything.
Yeah.
Listen, folks, if I go disappearing, I mean, we all know it's because of the last about 50 episodes, so.
Yeah. No, it didn't even make my, I saw the story.
When you went to Vegas,
yeah,
and you were witnessing all this different artificial intelligence, that type of thing, what was one of the ones that you went, oh my God?
Oh, casino can predict that you're going to cheat a day before you get to the casino.
How?
Oh God, they've analyzed so many patterns. They can see your spending patterns, what time you decided to fly in, what hotel you're going at, when you're checking in, what name you're using, whether all sorts of information compiled, and then they can single out that, saying statistically, based on all the information we have, this guy is a likely cheater, and then he's identified. And banks can use the same information to very precisely calculate the odds of you defaulting on a loan, or insurance companies. I mean, it works for and against you. I tell people, am I allowed to mention a brand on here or whatever? I use Sonnet Insurance, and then I gave it, I recommended it to a friend, and he's like, it sucks. I'm like, okay, well, for you it sucks because you actually have a terrible driving record, and there's nothing hidden about your record. In the old days, when they'd say, did you speed? And you could sort of like, I didn't speed. They don't even ask you that question because they know. They know absolutely precisely your legal record. We're only one step, and some people are against it or for it. I mean, would I share my Fitbit with the insurance company to get a better rate? Sure. And the guy who, there's always two sides to the story.
Yeah.
So invasion of privacy, quote unquote, can have huge benefits. If it means I walk into the store and the guy goes, "Hey, we have size 33 jeans on sale right now, and whatever, AA batteries," and you go, "What the? How'd you know that I was looking for that?" And that's where we're heading. Oh, in Vegas, I saw stuff that just scared me.
Then this pisses me off for a different reason, okay? This is what pisses me off. You got this technology that can predict who's going to cheat at a fucking casino.
Yep.
And we can't figure out that, I don't know, these drugs, if given when you have a fucking symptom, we put kiosks in our lovely country, take all the pressure off our healthcare system. Now I'm really pissed at our politicians. We have
brilliant people who could solve the most complicated problem.
I'm really pissed.
Yeah. I mean, ask, Elon Musk, like I watched Elon Musk launch a rocket like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
You know, and I watched it live, and even me and my sons, we've watched 10 of his launches, and it's like that booster goes up and comes backwards and lands on the same spot where it took off. That is so freaking complicated. In comparison, a virus is a joke. Yeah, we're solving problems that are way more complicated. So I think maybe is not in the conspiracy range, but definitely big pharma being involved and money being made. I mean, follow the money. It always comes to follow the money. Follow the money. There's a lot of money in COVID right now. I mean, Ray came home with a free COVID test. You know, one of them rapid tests.
Yeah.
Did you open the box, by the way, and look at them?
No.
So he comes home and I open the box, and man, there's there's instructions on how to use the test, and it says they're right there in black and white, right? This test is unproven on vaccinated people. We don't even know what the test results are going to be like on vaccinated people. And then it also says test not to be used unless you're professional. Test results need to be validated by this. And then there's even a statistical table that shows very precisely the chances of a positive, negative, and a false positive, and so forth. And it's all in there. And I'm like, we're just distributing these to people, doing home testing. It doesn't even work, and we're going to base policy on that. It's a joke. It's a joke.
What the hell are we doing?
It's a joke. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't. So yes, now we're back to I didn't care because I knew. Was it always this corrupt and always this bad?
I think a lot of us are asking that question.
And
right
I didn't
there.
care. So 40-year-old Marty, head down, solving cool problems in Edson and going golfing with his buddies and fishing. And he's sending $30,000 to Ottawa in tax. And he's like, that's all right. Whatever. I don't care. But now he's being attacked. And while he's attacked, he's digging. And as he's digging, he's like, holy shit, is the incompetence that bad? The incompetence is that bad. I learned that a long time ago. When you're dealing with governments, that's why I said I have a hard time buying into the conspiracy side, because they are that brutal. They are, and I take advantage of that. You know, the data is an example. People say they're scrubbing the data. I'm like, they're not that good to go and scrub all the data. So when they scrub one piece of data somewhere, the machine is so big and there's so much data coming in, and there's some clerk right there every day. He just fills out the form and puts out the number of ICU admissions, and I'll find that data. So you might have changed that chart, my friend, but I'll find the other chart where the other clerk is just doing his job, and I'll find where you are being incompetent. Helps me in that case, helps us. But then we're screaming in the wind because people aren't listening, and that's another problem. So too many people just don't care. They don't care that. So, God, we're in a whole other topic. I mean, I'm going to show that to people. I haven't even done that. I was waiting to open the box because I was actually going to do a video of the unboxing and do a video of me taking the test and whatnot. And immediately I just went, holy shit. And I'll show that to people and they won't care. They'll rush to get another box of free tests and they'll do a test at home. Did you hear the story of the girl who did a test on the airplane and then locked herself up in the bathroom?
Oh.
Like, you know, she got on a plane to Mexico or whatever, and she's just nervous. She has a kit in her purse or whatever. She takes out swabs her nose, goes and does a test and panics. She's got a positive test. She locked herself up in the bathroom for 3 hours. She didn't want to spread COVID to everybody else on the plane. Triple vaccinated, wearing a mask. Like, and back to now I'm laughing, right? Because the comment on Mo and other people, like, even Rachel Notley or whatever. Hey, I tested positive for COVID, but hey, it could have been worse. I'm like, no, that's not the conclusion. You're drawing the wrong conclusion. The conclusion is you still tested. Like, admit the truth. You're triple vaccinated and you tested for COVID. So either the test doesn't work or the vaccine doesn't work. Yeah, you're laughing at the girl on the plane. That was hilarious.
Bless her heart, eh? Bless her heart.
Yeah, bless her heart. Like, and bless the staff on the plane trying to.
There has to be a way we can like slowly veer off the course of like going down this route of like you're going to take 18 boosters to just still get COVID. Right? Whether you get it from the booster, whether you get it just because whatever, but like there's some, there's two memes. So at first, the first meme was making fun of the anti-vaxxers. It was a tombstone, and on the tombstone it said, he did his own research. Okay, so that's your meme. But then the new meme now is for the pro, the anti. We have our meme now, which is he's dead, but on the tombstone it says it could have been worse. So it goes both ways. But the end game is, I personally feel vindicated. I mean, What I worry about is I've been in this spot and getting to talk with some really esteemed doctors, even if people hate what they say. I had a thing from the UK get tossed at me a couple days ago, and so I sent it on to Dr. Alexander because I'm like, I can't read medical mumbo jumbo. I can draw my own conclusions, but I don't know if that's a right conclusion. And it was talking about the boosters and vaccines suppressing the immune system, essentially. And I was like, oh my God. Like, listen, we all know and have family members, friends, etc., that have taken this. And it was talking about how it's hindering your immune system and you're going to get sick in the future because of that. I'm like,
yeah, they got a term for that. I believe that. I believe that.
Well, there's a study out of the UK saying that.
Yeah.
And I had Dr. Alexander go through it, and he's like, no, that's exactly what it's saying. Now, it's early evidence. We don't, it's just one report.
Reading a medical paper is tough, which just reminded me. So in that box on those tests, there's another thing that's right there in black and white in the box. And it says that the home rapid antigen test cannot detect the difference between viable and non-viable virus. So that's medical term for saying it can't tell if the virus is alive or dead. It'll find a dead protein, and then you'll get a positive test. But you have an old dead virus shoved up your nose.
Why? Ah, man.
And yeah.
Can we just? I don't know if we can ever get back to it, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, the other thing that's helping us, God bless our American cousins. We will get. I mean, that's sad that it might be the end game is that it didn't occur internally. That we will just get out of it. We'll get out of it when there's an election, no matter what, and some of these players will get punted, and there's just a natural course of.
If people like Marty step up and
even if I don't step up, we'll still get new guys, and I think new guys, no matter what, will want to do something different. But the other thing is what's going on in the U.S. is like my in-laws are in Costa Rica right now. They last year they didn't go down, but this year they went down to Costa Rica. So I'm hoping, and they're already telling everybody, but it'll be loud when they come sit at the lake this year in June. They'll be saying, "Yeah, we were in Costa Rica and life was normal there." So
my parents just got back from Costa Rica.
Yeah, so they'll bring back some of that normalcy, and then watching Honduras and Japan and Mexico and places like that start opening.
The United States.
It's sad that that's what had to happen, that we couldn't get out of it ourselves.
My only fear is what Quebec just did, right? And the fact Trudeau said, "Oh, we'll have to." That's an interesting whatever, right?
He should have been hell no right off the bat. The fact that he even said that's interesting is
asinine.
Totally. Yeah. But I speak French, and I hear him. I truly, honestly hear him speak French on Quebec media, and then in English to us. And whoops, and
is it just two different messages?
Often is two different messages. Yeah, and then most of and I think he's kind of counting on people. Well, he's not just counting on it; it's a fact. People, the rest of Canada doesn't watch what he says in French, and vice versa. But if you listen carefully, I could pick out examples, and it's he caters. That's just the way he is. He's not a natural unifier. I mean, if the Quebecer says, those damn Albertans, they get all this, he just goes, you're right. He sympathizes with them. He goes down the sympathetic role, but he even does that, I think, as a tactic, because he really doesn't sympathize with anyone. He's not a sympathetic, caring individual. He cares about himself and his friends. I don't think he cares about anybody else.
I would agree. Let's move into this.
Okay.
We'll go into the Crude Master Final Five.
Okay.
So shout out to Heath and Tracy McDonald, who've supported the podcast since the very beginning. It's roughly 5 questions. We'll see how I do here on keeping it to 5. The first one I always start with, because I truly am curious if it may lead to new guests. It just may lead to people we need to start to look to. But if you could sit and do this with somebody, Marty, sit and have a open conversation, pick their brain, and see what their thoughts on not only where we are, but just really try and dig into what they got to say. Who would you want to sit with?
I'm a sucker for punishment, and I would want to sit down with Trudeau. But I don't, and we've talked about that. I've talked with my buddies, because I hike a lot, and we go as a group. It's like, let's get him out of his comfort environment, and let's bring him on a hike, and let's see what he's really like. I'm a sucker for punishment. I think I know the answer. I don't think he can get out of his canned answers. And I don't think he could be candid with you. Or if he tries to be candid, it's still too much conditioning. But to be honest, I'd love to actually sit down with him one-on-one for a long period of time and see what the hell makes that guy tick.
I wonder if he speaks open with a group of people. He must. All of us do.
Do you have to get him on a surfboard maybe? Do we get on a boat for a couple of days because we're taking a ferry up and down the coast, and somehow or other you have no choice. You're going to have to drink Pilsner, and you're going to have to eat a bag of chips with us, and you're going to have to, you're going to get pissed off because I took your towel and you took mine. I don't give a shit. Actually, I don't think he's a common sense man. I mean,
how much fun would be to have him on a boat. And I know a lot of farmers and anyone would have good ideas, but to just mess around with him, and he's got some fancy towel and just.
You and I work in the oil patch, man. We mess around with people. That's like in our DNA, right? I mean, I'll send.
That might be better. Who would you want to have on a boat with you for a week just to mess around with? Trudeau. Now a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah,
it'd be too easy. Be way too easy. He'd be crying by the end of the trip."
Here's your second one. Yukon Strong says, or wants to know if you've heard rumors that Trudeau plans to propose a suspension of Charter of Rights for 5 years. Is that
we're already there? No. I don't think he can. It's an interesting concept. I think he's already suspended the charter quite a bit, unjustifiably. That's another point. I mean, our Supreme Court judges are not like American judges. I mean, Americans just had a Supreme Court overturned Biden. I don't even think he has a veto left, whereas our guys are just folding. But anyways, listen, I think Trudeau's almost gone too far now. I mean, he's gone too far, and if he does that, he can't do it. Simplistically, I don't think he can do it. But if he tried to do it, what is he trying to do? Is he one step away from martial law? That would be, I'd hate to go there. I don't even want to broach that topic because I'll get in trouble. Okay,
Farm Cat. He wants to know which party you'll be supporting in the next election.
Federally or provincially?
I think we all know you're not voting Liberal in the next federal election.
No, sure. I'm not. So I voted. I actually voted Maverick in the last election, and it was a toss-up. Again, my pragmatism. I met in my writing. It's Tarek who's on the Maverick, and I actually met my PPC candidate, and I met Maxime Bernier. And so back to, I'm becoming a separatist, but what concerns me right now, my two number one concerns are the until recently the unfair treatment that Alberta's getting, but then we got to the charter attacks. I think the attacks on my rights and freedoms are more important right now than equity for Alberta, and for me to really protect my rights and freedoms, I really think both of my concerns are addressed by an independent Alberta, and that's why federally I'm turning into a separatist party. So, and I couldn't do PPC. PPC, Max is trying to play that role, bring back Confederation the way it was designed to be, with a weak Ottawa and provinces, and Ottawa just overseeing. But I'm like, again, on paper, you're trying to bring it back to where we were, and after 150 years, it doesn't quite work. And I'm like, no matter what you say, Max, if you get elected, you're going to still cater to Ontario and Quebec. It's just a problem.
Yeah.
So federally, I'm that way, and provincially, I'm still a conservative, but I'm really torn right now. Kenny, if you're listening to this, if he's still in power, I don't think I can vote for Kenny, and I don't vote for I've said it before, I vote for my local representative. Still old-fashioned that way. Have happened to have always.
So if you aren't going to vote Conservative, then would it be Wild Rose?
Probably, but then they don't even have a leader. That it's not a well-established party as far as I'm concerned, and it's probably a wasted vote. But I'm not opposed to a quote wasted vote. I would lean towards Wild Rose. Hopefully it's Conservative. Hopefully this leadership debate comes back and we're back on track. I mean, I had hopes for Kenny. He disappointed in the last couple of years. I hope he can bring it back.
And I know a lot of people have echoed your thoughts.
Yeah.
That is, if Kenny's still the leader, my vote's going elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so, I listened.
And Brian Jean in Fort McMurray is a whole wrench now because Kenny has to call a by-election by the end of February. So we're going to see how that evolves. But sorry to interrupt you.
No.
You said I echoed the sentiment of many. What were you going to say?
Well, that a lot of people can't vote for him again because he says, the betrayal is too big. It's too big to come back.
Yep.
And I listened to an interview with Fauci, and then I know everybody's got their thoughts on him. When he actually speaks and now I best preface this, when he speaks in an interview with relative softballs and not be impressed, sure, he's actually a pretty smart guy. I mean, obviously to be in the position he is, he has to be a smart guy. But one of the things that really surprised me, he was on this interview, and the guy was saying, I think the public no longer respects what you're saying. Like, even your side of people that really liked you, they don't respect you anymore. Will you step aside? And he lost it like multiple times. The guy said, listen, I'm not saying that what you've done is wrong. I'm just saying that public opinion on you no longer. If they came to you, would you step aside? And he just kept saying, that's wrong. I will not step aside. And I'm like, that's where I feel like Kenny's at, is his voter base doesn't like him. And I worry that his pride is going to get in the way and that he will not step aside. Well, I mean, all he has to do is just look at what's going on. I understand his career, his entire life has been led to this point.
I mean, he's being backstabbed by numerous of his MLAs, and I don't know. He won't go.
He won't go willingly.
He won't go willingly. Now, does he truly and honestly believe that that it's not salvageable at this point? Probably. I mean, those guys are wired that way. Like they're just wired. He in particular he's never lost an election of any kind, so he's wired to. What's his next game? That's the other thing. I mean, if his next game, the only way he'd go willingly is if he already saw the writing on the wall for his next gig. So if he's thinking that he's going back to Ottawa, then sure, he might go willingly because he's got an opportunity. That perhaps is a way out gracefully for him. But I think right now, I'm saying it's 50-50. He's going down. He might go down in the next few months.
Let's give you an easy one here. A Boyle guy from Twitter goes, "What's your favorite cut of meat and how rare do you like it?"
Well, I hunt, so my cuts of meat are my favorite game is elk, and I butcher myself, so my cuts are not that pretty. But if we have a special occasion at home and Karen says, "What do you want for that special occasion?" it is an absolute T-bone, and I like my steaks rare.
That doesn't surprise me. What a maniac!
Boyle's an awesome town, by the way. I used to spend, I knew a Lori Cordingly, so if Lori's out here or anybody knows Lori, say I had a Lori for me. Old mayor of Boyle.
What a maniac from Twitter wanted to know. He was saying government's manipulating and misrepresenting data. The thing that caught me about I don't know if it was a question or not, but I was going to ask it. He mentions nudge units, the government using nudge units. Have you heard anything about that?
No.
To use fear to get the public to comply.
Well, they're definitely doing that in a lot of senses. I don't know what a nudge specifically is, or is he talking about fudge numbers or nudge? But nudge, I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, well, a perfect example right now is the data is there's no reason to vaccinate kids, none whatsoever. Like, why would you vaccinate a kid under 12 years old when I just told you that the likelihood of, there's been one fatality in kids under the age of 19 in Alberta out of 800,000 kids
in 2 years.
and they rarely have symptoms. So they'll use data. It's not data at this point. It's actually propaganda. I mean, some of these. I found it really sick to the people that were taking their kids there and taking all these fake pictures and putting on the stickers with the happy smile and trying to make it. I understand that that's appropriate period when you have kids to. But that's private. You make the experience a little more less stressful for a kid.
They literally had,
but you don't need to advertise it.
Sesame Street telling you to go get vaccinated. Right?
Well, it was so pathetic in Toronto. It was almost like we're handing out ice cream sandwiches on the main, in Nathan Phillips Square to get you to come in. I mean, come on. I don't know if that's the question that they're asking, but governments will use definitely tactics like that to. And that's an interesting one. I don't know what the real motive was for trying to get vaccinated all the way down to that low. Did they just need the numbers? I mean, we're already at 80%. So we didn't even need the kids. Good news is parents have seen the light. That's something I've been trending and printing every couple of weeks. A month of 6 weeks into vaccinating kids, and we're not even at 40%. So the uptake of first doses for kids under 12 is very low.
What I worry about with that is if the government mandates that in order to go to school, play sports, you'll see an uptick again. If they start to use the pressure, you'll also see...
Pressure works because I think the first batch of people who got their kids vaccinated are people who wanted to go to Mexico. Mom and dad are vaccinated and want to make sure that the kid didn't add an extra layer of whatever obstacles at the airport. So just to be safe, let's vaccinate the kid. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I think pragmatically.
Well, here's your final one. I apologize to all the questions that came in, but Brad Rush had asked, what do you think of Canadian opinion writers? I'm going to just twist it a little bit because we've talked about media and everything else. Is there a Canadian opinion writer that you pay attention to that has balanced or insightful thoughts?
I'm not a big reader, so I'm a watcher, and surprisingly, I still watch, the CBC, and I like the panel. I like Chantal Hébert on the CBC, and she's often side by side with Andrew Coyne, and they both write she writes for the Star, and I think Andrew writes for Maclean's or whatever, but. Chantal is brilliant, and I wouldn't even I think she's one of the last impartial journalists. She's pretty good. I mean, of course, there's Rex Murphy and people like that, and but I don't read. I'll listen to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts and watching, but I'm not a big reader, even though I'm on Twitter. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you making the drive and doing this. This has been an enjoyable couple hours. I certainly like being back in the studio. Being back in the studio is so much better, as we've said, than doing it over Zoom, and that definitely we discussed. But I'm glad we decided.
When was the last time you were in the studio? A couple of weeks ago, months ago, or?
No, it isn't. It hasn't been that long because it's starting to become a bit of a trend. Yeah. Jamie Sinclair and Henry Seidlitz were two Saskatchewan boys who drove about the same distance as you to come talk about hockey Sask hockey mandates on kids and that type of thing. So we got to sit in here then, and I'm just trying to think now if there's been anyone else, but it's starting. I had a cop drive from somewhere undisclosed in Alberta, and we didn't release his full name, and Shane Getz in the MLA flew into town, which was cool, and came and sat. So it's for about a year nobody.
Yeah, and I wonder if your audience will notice a little bit different dynamic. Hopefully they do.
Well, one thing they'll notice is sound quality is way better, right? Yeah. You get to actually use the studio mics. Yeah. But two, it's a better feel. Everybody knows. Anybody who listens long term.
I'm tickled pink. Thanks for having me on. Like I said, my wife said, "Why would you do this?" It's I'll give you one quick story. I mean, I do truly believe that people miss out on opportunities. There could be so many opportunities in life, and people miss out. And couple of years ago, I did a hike, and I did it as a contest. I invited somebody, and did a little live stream, and I said that I was picking up this guy at the airport, and I was gonna go buy a steak. And out of the blue, I get a text from a guy named Evan Robertson, and he just texts me, and he's like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I've been watching you on YouTube for years, and I'm the executive chef at this restaurant. And if you haven't picked up Eric yet, why don't you? If you haven't done groceries, why don't you come down to the restaurant, and then I'll feed you guys." Easy to say no.
Yep.
I could just say no, right? I'm like, I'm not gonna say no. I don't say no. So I went there, and me and Evan hit it off, and then after that, he's been a friend for years, and we developed this hiking partnership, and there's no financial enrichment. It's just an opportunity to meet somebody that you can get along with. So I had no idea what this would be, but it'd be easy to say no, but I'm not gonna say no. In fact, and we could have done it by video, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna come in person. We're gonna meet, and we're gonna see what comes out of this. So I'm sure this is this will lead to something else. We don't know what, but I'm sure it'll lead to something else. Or if all we do is help people better understand what's going on, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you.